You ever got those movies where you both like it and don't? There's just so many good things and bad things about it, so much so that you can't even make up your mind on how you feel about it. Well, I've got those movies. I've got 10 of them, in fact. And I'm going to talk about them today. Why? Well, I asked you guys if you wanted to see a video like this, and nearly unanimously you guys decided to let it happen. So, why not give you guys what you want? Here are my top 10 most conflicted films. Now before we begin, I do want to say something. This is all opinion based. You can like these movies, you can not like these movies. For me, it's tough. That's the whole point of this thing. Now how this thing is going to work is I'm going to go one by one talking about these films in order of the least conflicted to most conflicted. The first couple I have definitive opinions on, but still am a little bit of confliction here. But as we get to number 1, it's going to be downright impossible to decide how I feel about it. But let's not keep you guys waiting any longer. Here it is, my top 10 most conflicted films. Number 10, Megamind. So Will Ferrell plays this blue alien guy who is this villain and he never ever wins because he's always being challenged by Brad Pitt, who plays a superhero. One day, the superhero just up and dies and Megamind takes over the city. Only to find out he doesn't really like that, so he tries to create his own superhero while disguising as this naughty, uptight museum operator, I guess? Janitor? Something along the lines of that. And he starts falling for a reporter played by Tina Fey. And it's just a bunch of escalating insanity and drama from there. I do like this film, but there is a big asterisk next to it. I like the drama in this film way more than the comedy. That's not to say the comedy isn't good, it's just not fantastic. There's not any real gut-buster moments. And I don't think the film was really trying for that. It is kind of trying to be a dramedy. But I think it does one element way, way better. You really feel for Megamind and his struggles to not only create this hero, but to also fight off the urge to be a hero, and to be normal, and accepted. And as it goes on, the film focuses more on that aspect. And it feels a little disjointed because the first third is definitely comedy, the last third is definitely drama action, and then the middle third is just kind of a weird unbalanced mix. It's a good unbalanced mix, but it's still unbalanced. I don't know, I still like it, but there's some weird stuff in this. I take it for what it's worth. Number 9, Fat Albert. I already talked a bit about this one already, so I'll make it brief. No, this has nothing to do with Bill Cosby and the fact that he not only had a hand in writing this, but also appears in it. That has nothing to do with how I feel about this movie, although it does make it a little more awkward. While it does have a very, very good heart and does teach a very nice message, it's kind of weird. It's so drenched in early to mid-2000s cheese, and you just can't view this as anything but a product of its time. Constant music references, pop culture references, lingo, terminology, technology. This couldn't have been anything else but 2003 or 4. It's so incredibly dated now, but at the same time, the dated parts kind of make it funny and charming. But I won't deny that that's also not good writing. A good writer can make anything, even pop culture references that no one will remember, still funny upon later airings. Look at Tiny Toons and Animaniacs for a reference. They make fun of a bunch of old commercials, celebrities, a lot of things that people these days probably haven't heard of, but they're still funny on their own. This is just, hey, let's have Fat Albert and the gang sit around and watch music videos and do all this weird, cool techno stuff. Like with computers, it's just weird. But, like I said, the message is pretty good, the actors are pretty good. It does not do a very good job of adapting the source material, which is weird because Bill Cosby, like I said, had a hand in making this thing. It messes up a lot of key components, a lot of key characters, and even their appearance gets messed up, especially for some characters like Weird Harold. But that's not a huge issue. Really, this thing is not great, but I still like it anyways. But there is that thing in the back of my head that always says, this movie's not great, this movie's not great, but I kinda like it anyways, I think? And no, I'm not gonna knock it for its Portal plot, because it started doing that way before it became overused. Alright, that's Fat Albert. Next one. Number 8. The Pink Panther. No, not the original. The one with Steve Martin in it. This thing is stupid. Unbelievably stupid. But it's funny stupid sometimes. Sometimes it's unbelievably obnoxious. Like, for example, Steve Martin's voice in this. His accent's kind of funny, but it does get extremely grating. The mystery, while not incredibly obvious, isn't the most hidden thing either. The jokes are extremely hit and miss, but when they hit pretty dang well. It's kind of like a Happy Madison movie where it tries to hit very below the belt to get laughs a lot of the time. But every so often they'll get some pretty clever ones in there, like the whole I want to investigate everyone in this town named you. That whole bit there, and that it actually comes in and actually benefits with the plot. This thing is definitely not as good as the originals. Absolutely not. While those were actually sophisticated and charming, this is just loud and stupid. But I still kinda have fun with it, despite all of its flaws, but it really depends on the mood. Sometimes the flaws kinda overwhelm it and make it not fun to watch. Sometimes the flaws are easily able to be ignored. It's really tough. I think people were trying when this was getting made, but I'm not quite sure. It kinda just feels like either a cheap cash-in or a remake that just doesn't understand what made the original good, and I hate those, but this one has its moments, and it does... I don't know, Pink Panther, I just don't know with you. But hey, this isn't the one I'm most conflicted on. It's about to get worse. Number 7. The Interview. Oh boy. So, this film was unbelievably controversial when it came out because it's about these two guys who own a talk show and manage a talk show, and they find out that Kim Jong-un, the leader of North Korea, is a very, very big fan and he wants to be interviewed. So they go to North Korea and it's just all this stupid exploit stuff about how they get hired to assassinate him, and the interview is rigged so all the questions make Kim Jong-un look good. This film is awful, really. The humor is unbelievably sophomoric, but what do you expect? It's the Seth Rogen style of comedy. The only film of theirs I actually liked was The Disaster Artist. I don't think a single joke in this made me laugh. Not one. At all. And it's a comedy. You need to laugh. But that's not what makes my opinion of this, though, because the story is interesting. While the story is, yes, really stupid, they could have done it by making it so overdramatic that it's kind of funny. And that's kind of what they start doing at first, but then it starts taking itself weirdly seriously. And that's when I start liking it. See, one of the guys who is interviewing Kim Jong-un actually gets convinced that North Korea is an okay place. And he totally goes along with it and falls into the propaganda. I mean, it's not realistic, and absolutely not. But it is interesting to watch. And you start getting the scope of the characters. They actually start feeling developed and fully realized. And then it becomes interesting. But does that make the rest of the film worth watching just to get up to that? I don't know. That's why it's on the list. The stuff before it was so bad, but this stuff is actually really endearing. Even the last fight scene, while not really funny, it is really stupid and kind of enjoyable in that sense. This film was unbelievably controversial at its time, and I think had it not been for that, this film would have been entirely forgotten. But, does it really deserve to be? I don't know. I guess that's why it's here. Number 6, Incredibles 2. I've already spoken a bit about this one, so I'll keep it brief. No, it absolutely does not live up to the first one. No, I absolutely did not expect it to. That's like expecting Toy Story 3 to be better than Toy Story 2. Granted, Toy Story 3 was good, but just, you can't top 2. Or it's like expecting Finding Dory to be better than Finding Nemo. I mean, it pretty much was the same movie, but... Anyways, the animation is very well done here, and with the exception of one or two aspects to some characters like Mr. Incredible himself, the characters still feel very, very close to their original personas. Violet especially, I think, is very on point, as she gets a lot more focus in this film than in the last one, and I think her character really expands and grows. I actually found her plight of trying to get back with this guy even though his memory's been erased, and then her questioning if the whole superhero thing is actually good, I found that really interesting. I liked that, and honestly, I wish that was one of the more mentioned plot points. This movie has a feminism angle, but it doesn't shove it in your face like you'd expect Disney to. It just has it there and casually leaves it. Doesn't draw a huge amount of attention to it and just has it be. That's the way I like it. Sonic Boom, of all things, said it best. Constantly referring to women and minorities breaking through the glass ceiling makes it seem like more of an exception to the rule rather than the status quo, and to have it be more normalized, just have them be in those roles and have them do these things without constantly drawing attention to it. Now I'm gonna step off the soapbox here. The fight scenes are decent. Not fantastic, but decent. To be fair, it is Pixar, so it's not really an action studio. But what keeps this thing from being good? The plot is not the best. It's pretty much just Mr. Mom, but with superheroes. And it's funny most of the time, but it's still Mr. Mom with superheroes. The villain is unbelievably terrible. Without giving too much away, the villain is totally obvious, and they treat it like a big mystery. As soon as they showed up, I even out loud in the theater said, "Villain." It was okay because it was like 11 at night when we went to go see it, and it was just our group of friends. And turns out I was right. The design, the name, it all tells you that this person's gonna be the villain. And the villain's plan is stupid too, and their motivation is ridiculous. Only thing is, I can't talk about it here, because there's no spoilers here. If you want to know my full thoughts about this, go look up the Incredibles 2 video we did way back in September. But that's not all either. This definitely suffers from the whole, "member this, member that" from the original. Not as bad as something like Finding Dory was, but still, it's definitely there, and it's definitely annoying. It's partially because, we had been waiting for Incredibles 2 for a while. And while I never expected it to live up to the original, I kind of expected a little something better than this, but at the same time, it had its good moments. It really did. It's like a 50-50 thing. But the thing is with the 50-50 is it's an unlevel 50-50. Some days I'm like, it wasn't as bad as I've been saying, and then other days I was like, oh no, it's worse than I've been saying. From the moment I got out of the theater, I just could not decide whether or not I actually liked this thing. And with some films like Into the Spider-Verse, which I ended up thinking, yeah, that was good. Not great, but good. Or The Last Jedi, where I was thinking, no, that was bad. This, I still haven't thought of a real decision, even almost a year later. And I think that's pretty telling that I'm never gonna get a decision on this thing. But you know what? That's alright with me. Because I'm not watching Disney films anyways. Haha. Number 5, Fern Gully, The Last Rainforest. We get it. Save the environment. Save it. Al Gore's super wonder. That's really the whole point of this film. Save the rainforest, go green, Captain Green, and the eco-teens. And yeah, it gets kind of obnoxious. However, it's not too obnoxious because it has some good elements. The animation is very, very well done. The acting, while not stellar from a lot of people, as their characters leave a lot to be desired, they're very good with what they're given. Robin Williams especially blows it out of the water. Apparently, he has about 2.5 hours of cut improvisation from this film. And there's some videos of him on YouTube of him voicing the character Batty, and when he does the whole thing, oh man, it's just great. You gotta look those up. The film is basically just about this guy who is going with his friends to cut down some trees in the rainforest. The fairies, who don't like that, shrink him down in order to teach him about the environment. However, an evil tree gets cut down, releasing this slime monster named Hexus, played by Tim Curry. And yeah, just save the environment. The songs are kinda hit and miss, some good, some bad. The characters, like I said, are not the best. The animation is very well done. There are a couple parts where it's not the best, but for the most part it is very good. The writing is definitely typical cheesy early 90s family film. It's the whole fish out of water where the little tiny insignificant foreign people don't understand human technology. And the new guy coming into the new place doesn't understand their customs, but he grows to love them, and hey, this sounds a lot like Avatar. I'm not kidding. There's a guy who's coming here to destroy and essentially take all the resources from this one area, and then he ends up becoming part of the indigenous people that he was going to harm in some way. He ends up falling for one of them, and then there's this evil monster, and they have to band together to destroy it. This is pretty much Avatar. And like Avatar, it's very, very, very hit and miss. There will be times where I'm thinking, maybe the film wasn't that bad, and I'll watch it, and I'll say, yeah, it wasn't. And then I'll walk out of it later, maybe 2 hours later, saying, maybe that wasn't very good. And then the cycle just repeats. I don't know how to feel about this. The message is annoying, and the writing isn't great. But the actors have a lot of fun with it, especially Robin Williams. The songs are fairly decent most of the time, and the animation is good. I don't know what to make of it. Simple as that. Now, on every list, there's always going to be that one that nobody has ever heard of. And here we go. Number 4, Tom Sawyer, from the year 2000. So I just call it Tom Sawyer 2000. Made by the same people that made The Secret of NIMH 2. Ah! This one's better, I think. Right off the bat, I'll just say I'm not a big fan of Tom Sawyer. I find the character kind of obnoxious, and I find the book a little too slow. Now, Huckleberry Finn, that's where things get interesting, but one thing at a time. This film has a fantastic cast. Betty White's in it, of course, but aside from that, there's Hank Williams Jr., Waylon Jennings, and Hynden Walsh. But notice those first two that I said. Well, they're country singers, not actors. In fact, half of this cast is country singers. Which is awesome because that means they get to sing a lot of country songs and they have authentic Southern accents. However, they're not kids. Tom and his friends are supposed to be 10, but they sound like they're 30 years old. I mean, they do a decent job with what they're given. They're not great actors, but they're good. And when it comes to singing, because this definitely is a musical, they're very good. The songs in this are exceptional. My favorites being There's a Light at the End of the Tunnel and Hook, Line, and Sinker. The boat painting song isn't really great, but that's just the one weak link. And it fits, because, this whole thing takes place in Missouri. Making all the people animals, I don't really care about that. But the animation is not the best. During the songs, it can be a bit trippy, and during a lot of regular shots, the sizes can be inconsistent, the animation can be laggy, or the movements aren't quite right. This thing was definitely made on the cheap there, probably because they blew all the budget trying to get this all-star cast and composing these songs. After all, animation is always the last part you do in any animated thing, so it makes sense that when they were making the animation, they kinda ran out of resources. But it doesn't look terrible. How does this follow the book, you might ask? Well, it gives Amy a little bit more of a role, it changes the ending, and it swaps out one of the characters. Other than that, it's pretty close. The film received a lot of flack at the time for switching out those aspects, but really, that's not very much. It still keeps the original story intact. And it's far from the worst adaptation of Tom Sawyer. And also, this thing has some guts. We see at least 2 characters die on screen. Yeah, and this thing's rated G. Meanwhile, Inside Out is rated PG for whatever reason. Ratings make so much sense. So is this film great? I don't know. Is this film terrible? I don't know. It's so mixed. It's unbelievably mixed. I will admit that I go back to watch it every now and then, but that's a very, very, very prolonged every now and then, like once every 2, maybe 3 years, maybe. And I never, ever have been able to find out whether this thing is actually good. I've been watching this thing since 2012, and I still can't figure it out. 7 years, 3 viewings. No idea. Number 3, Life of Brian. I really, really shouldn't be watching this one, because this whole thing is just making fun of religion. That's all it's here for. That's all it seeks to do. But it's funny. It's really funny. There are some parts that aren't, of course, but Monty Python, with the exception of The Meaning of Life and maybe 1 or 2 sketches from their show, are always comedic geniuses. And even though I kinda take offense to almost every joke in this thing, it's still funny? Now, this is a guilty pleasure, not like, oh, it's bad, but I like it anyways. No, but it's funny and I enjoy it, but I really know I shouldn't be. This thing is about this guy named Brian who gets confused to be Jesus, and he basically goes through all of Jesus' motions. And it has a lot of classic stuff, like always look on the bright side of life. That stems from here. Fun little pokings at the religious aspects of the Bible and all the stories in there, but again, as a religious person myself, that's not great to watch. I don't know. That's basically all I can say about Life of Brian. It's just a jumble. I enjoy it, I have fun with it, but I know I shouldn't. Funny how that works. Number 2, The Flintstones. John Goodman was the perfect choice to play Fred Flintstone. I'm gonna say that right now. He is the only actor who could have played him in live action and done him well. You hear that, Viva Rock Vegas? He nails this role. The others who play the parts from the show, they do a decent job as well. Not as good as John Goodman, though. The sets look very cheap, especially, a lot of the dinosaurs, especially Dino. But it still looks like the original show. And it's like the Popeye movie with Robin Williams, where they try so hard to replicate the cartoon that it just kind of comes across as uncanny. But I also kind of like the uncanny, and oh boy. This film was not received well at all when it came out. People called it a cash grab and cheap and lazy, but I liked it, I think. I mean, yeah, the plot is unbelievably stupid and way too convoluted. Yeah, the cheap sets are kind of distracting. Yeah, the inconsistencies in the plots are really weird. But on the other hand, the actors have a lot of fun with it, and I do like the Flintstones cartoon, and this does a very good job of replicating it most of the time. And it clearly wasn't just some cash grab. They put a lot of heart and effort into this, because like I said, it's very, very close to what the original show was, and it was, like Popeye, a passion project. I take it for what it is, but I don't really know what it is. So there's that. Number 1 is one that I've spoken about for a very, very, very long time. And I have made a nearly 2-hour video about it. But in order to be more condensed, I will talk about it one more time here. The number 1 film that I am the most conflicted on is Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Make no mistake, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory is one of my absolute favorite films of all time. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, the book, was one of my favorite books growing up. And Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory was one of my favorites when I was growing up as well. And it was my favorite between the 2 films until I read the book. For every good thing this film has, it has something terrible about it. Let's start with the good. For the time, the sets look amazing. Granted, they look exactly like that, just sets. It never really feels like another world. It never really feels like some kind of fantasy place like the book was supposed to be. It looks like a set. But it's a nice set, except for the inventing room that just looks like somebody's garage. The chocolate room especially, I think, looks fantastic. Even if the chocolate river looks like brown water, which, funny anecdote, in the new film, it's all like plastic and paint, but it looks like chocolate. In this one, it's actually water with some cream and chocolate, and it just looks like water. And apparently it reeked in there, but you'd never know that just by looking at them. Gene Wilder does a good job as pseudo Willy Wonka. It's not Willy Wonka, but he does a good job playing him. A lot of the actors do good jobs, except maybe the actress who plays Veruca. I think she kind of delivers too much of a one-note performance. The songs are good, even if the Oompa Loompa songs are just the same one repeated over and over again. This film has a lot of charm to it, and is a definitely endearing film, even if it was just made to be a corporate cash-in. Oh, you never heard that story? Oh, let me tell you. So, they contacted Roald Dahl to make this movie. He was all excited because he wanted to make a big screen adaptation of one of his favorite books. However, the people who made this was the Quaker Oats Company. They just wanted to make a Wonka line of candy, which somewhat still goes on to this day. They didn't really care about making a great film, they just wanted to make candy. Roald Dahl, albeit in a very delayed manner, ended up writing the script for the film, and they took it and he never heard back from them. He was still credited as the writer in the film, but they changed his script entirely, and he was furious. What more than made him furious was that this thing had nothing to do with the book. It takes the characters' names and some of the basic plot beats, but other than that, nothing, absolutely nothing. And yeah, as a fan of the book, that's infuriating. If this thing came out today, those who read the book would be livid, taking to the internet talking about how terrible of an adaptation it was. But no, because it's an old classic, it has to be respected and remembered. Nowhere is this change more personified than in Gene Wilder's performance. Yes, the Oompa Loompa songs being changed are very distracting, but The Wonka one's more interesting to talk about. See, Willy Wonka is this insane maniac who has been stuck in his chocolate factory for years. Decades, maybe. This has caused his sanity to completely crumble. Think about it. The only people he's really been talking to for so long are the Oompa Loompas. And except for singing, they don't really talk. He hasn't had social interaction in so long. Because of this, he's very out of touch with today's people. He is totally insane, freakishly bizarre, and says horrible things and just expects people to take it. Gene Wilder plays him as a charming, sophisticated, lovable, slightly odd man, which is the complete antithesis of what he is. You may be saying, oh, well, that's okay. It's an adaptation, things have to change, and you know what? You're right. While we're on the subject, let's make an adaptation of Lord of the Rings where Frodo is some kind of selfish, uptight bigot who will only do things for other people if it benefits himself more. Oh, and he's also a sniveling coward. How does that sound? Don't like it? Don't worry, I have more ideas. Let's make an adaptation of Tom Sawyer where Tom Sawyer is just this misunderstood little boy who's always there to help people out and never wants to get in trouble because he's too afraid of getting punished. Don't like that? Well, how about an episode of Star Wars where Luke Skywalker, instead of being this hopeful, young, inspiring individual, is gloomy and depressed, and even though he finds all the hope that he can to churn his father good, sees that his nephew might be slightly evil and then wants to kill him. Oh wait, they already did that. You see where I'm getting at? It's one thing to change a few things for the sake of an adaptation, but it's another to completely turn the character backwards and inside out in order to fit your demo. The characters are also a lot weaker here than they were in the book. Augustus loses his arrogance, so he's just this slightly pleasant to talk to kid that just eats. Violet, yeah, she's pretty much the same. Veruca is now just loud, shrill, and abrasive, where in the book she was actually kind of conniving and clever about the way she was spoiled. Kind of like in the new movie where she just uses her charm. Mike TV goes from this cynical, angry, almost emotionless, and extremely violent kid to a kid that watches a little bit too much TV and is actually someone I'd probably hang out with in real life. A lot of people will say Charlie's just a bit of a Mary Sue in the book and in the new film, and that here he's actually got a personality. While that is true, Charlie's not supposed to have a personality. He's supposed to be an insert character for the audience. I know that doesn't exactly excuse it, and I will say he is a bit more of an interesting character here and does actually feel like a real kid, which is another thing I feel conflicted about. But for all of its faults, it still has all those good things I mentioned earlier, and it's just so charming. I don't know if I can really hate it. I know I should. I mean, Roald Dahl absolutely did, but I'm not Roald Dahl. I like it, I own it, and I watch it, but I don't know if I fully like it. I think part of it is because this thing is being hailed as some kind of cinematic great, while the film that was actually made to be an adaptation that was meant to make the late author happy gets trashed for being a quote-unquote remake of this, which it's not a remake. To quote Mr. Coate, saying that Charlie and the Chocolate Factory is a remake of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory is like saying that Disney's Hunchback of Notre Dame is a remake of the original Hunchback film with Lon Chaney Jr. I don't know, I think if people gave Charlie and the Chocolate Factory more credit and these films were seen on equal ground, or at least somewhat equal ground, even if this one was still seen as better, I think I would be a lot more fine with this film. I think it would probably be around number 6 or 7. But that reputation really factors into that, and it makes the negatives so much worse for me. But it's not a fully bad film, really, when you get down to it. I've spoken about it ad nauseum. I may or may not do so again, because I tend to bring this topic up a lot. But either way, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory is the number 1 most conflicted film that I know. So what do you think of these films? What are some films you're conflicted on? Comment below, let me know. Thanks for watching this, guys. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I know people hate it when they say this, but hey, that's the only way this thing is gonna grow, right? Alrighty, I'll see you guys next time. Good night, everybody.